Hi, it's Lil from Made by Marley. And after all that time of being sick, I am back. And today is going to be a belter. So if you want to know how to add texture, do textured stenciling, add decoupage paper, mix some colours, add clay to paint, you're at the right place. This is today's victim. It's a deco piece. It's a sideboard. It's in relatively good nick. It's very big for a modern day home. It's very high. So what I'm going to actually do is get Martin to cut it down. I don't know whether you can see here, about here. It won't upset the integrity because it's got the balance, the middle bar for the height. But I don't want that height. My intention was to keep these lovely deco handles, but I'm actually going to take them off and keep them for another piece. I'm going to put something completely different on it. I'm going to really change the look of this piece entirely. And something exciting, I have recently designed some new decoupage paper. There's 3 in the range and it's 3 papers all the same, and it's from the Hot Chick collection. And today I am going to be using these birds. All 3 of the collection are all different kinds of birds, birds of paradise. These are vintage birds that I've obviously designed and put a sort of bohemian background onto. So I'm going to be using this today. Now, I'm going to go away off camera and I'm going to clean my piece, remove my handles, and I'm going to get Martin to cut it down. Then we're going to start working on putting some texture on it. And for that, you need your paint choice. I'm adding today some bentonite clay just to give it some texture. It's just the same as any other sort of texture additive. This will be a little bit finer, so I'm hoping to do some re-stencil work as well. So you're going to need a heat gun because we're going to put quite a lot of that on, dry it, and then cover it in paint, leave it for 24 hours and come back and do way more. But let's get on, get this cleaned so we can crack on. So you can use salt wash, you can use bicarbonate of soda, you can use the end of your paint in an Annie Sloan can that's dried up, that's really thick. You could use that. You can use any of these things to add texture. I'm using clay powder. It's a deep pore cleansing clay. It's just clay. It's 100% natural clay, and all I'm doing is, now I never use Dixie Bell paint, just don't use it, but I love this colour, and this is called Palmetto. It's a lovely greeny colour, and this is going to be our base. Quite a lot of this is all going to be covered up anyway, but this is the colour. So I'm trialling this paint to see what I think as well. Now it's going to change the colour because obviously the clay is yellow, and it's going to make our mixture. I'm going to need to put some more paint into that, but I've picked quite a dark colour of paint, so I better not spill it. I'm having an awful time spilling recently, and I'm wanting to make up a really nice thick paste that I can stencil onto. Whoa. Back in the studio making a mess. And it's all been tidied up as well. Martin and Tom as my son Tom tidied my studio up. So it's all nice and clean as well right now. But now I'm back over here. Now, I want it really quite thick, and I want it to be able to hold a texture. And I think that there looks about what I'm looking for. Now, process we're going to do is, I'm going to stencil round really roughly, like it's been on. It's all haphazard, it's worn. Then I'm going to, what's left of this after I've done that, pour some more paint in it and stipple the whole lot, but not the top, with texture. We're going to do something different on the top. So let's get set up. Now, I'm sure what I'm about to show you is completely and utterly sacrilegious, but is that a word? I don't know. I had a great big redesign by Prima stencil. It was too big. It was always too big for my pieces of furniture. So what I've done is I've just cut parts out of it that I want to use, and I might actually even cut it again. But I'm going to get more use out of it this way, and so this is what I've done. So I'm trying to think of my corners and edges and just kind of where I want it to be. Kind of like, don't want it to be, I've got a hinge here, but as I said, I'm not caring too much about the mess element of how untidy it is. So let's just see how we go with this. What I intend to do is dry it with my heat gun before I go over the top of it, before I leave it for overnight. I'm just wanting it kind of roughly around this hinge. Let's see what this is going to do. Now, it might end up a complete and utter dog's dinner, but I'm wanting texture, so I'm not really too bothered how it happens. Let's see what that's like. Fabulous. Now, we can sand these edges back and knock them back once it's dry. But I want to try and kind of like keep this sort of pattern, the same sort of florally sort of affair up here. So I'm just gonna do this here. And all I'm doing on the front, but not the panel, because that's where I'm going to put my decoupage paper, is just thinking about texture. Now, it doesn't matter about parts like this. This is what I'm trying to say to you about. We're going to be adding more texture over the top of this once I've dried it. So I'm going to go on and I'm going to use this part, but I'm also, you get the gist, I'm using a scraper. I've got my clay and my paint together, and all I'm doing is I'm just doing a raised stencil, but I'm looking for it to look very worn and messy. So for example, quickly, if I take maybe this flower pattern here, and I forgot to show you as well, I have cut the feet off the furniture. This has been thoroughly cleaned. Somebody in their infinite wisdom decided to stick paper to the inside of the shelves, but we managed to get that all out. Martin's removed the handles, and I've also filled the handles, and I've removed the drawers. So you can see where I'm going with this. I'm just putting lots of interesting texture. I'm going to add little pieces and parts, so some of this up in here maybe, and I'm just going to go around the whole of the kind of outsides of the panels, but not the panels, okay, not the panels. I'm going to go on and do that now. Okay, so this has been dried with a heat gun. Now, on top of these ones, you just want the plain paint. You don't particularly want any more texture, really. So we're just going to do the sort of stippling effect. Now I'm using an old chip brush for this. And we're just going to do that in here. Now, once I get to these parts up here, I'm going to start adding more texture in again, but I don't want to put all this texture on and then lose it with putting more clay on top of it. So right now I'm just trying to, now this is just a base coat, so I'm not looking for full coverage. In fact, if there's some brown showing through, I'm not going to complain about that at all. So this is all I'm going to do here, making sure that I'm putting texture in using my paint, but I'm not overloading the texture I've already put on. Now, with, oh, Martin's choking. I might have to stop and do the Heimlich maneuver, or maybe not. Are you okay, Martin? Okay. For the edges, I'm just going to mix up little parts of the same mix that I made my raised stencil with, of the clay. Now, this is a far more economical way to make a paint thickener. you get clay-based paint, so we know it sticks onto furniture. We know that there's no problem with this. So I've just made up quite a thick piece here. Now, all I'm going to do is, I'm just showing you, is up in here, up round here where I haven't got any texture, and round here where I haven't got any texture, not on my design itself, I'm just going to add some texture. So I'm just kind of going to go between the two brushes until I've painted the whole piece, until, you know, I've covered all my bases. I'm not going to paint all of this in here, but what I will do is I'm just going to do this right into my edge, because I don't want any, you know, where my decoupage paper is going to be any of the wood showing. So I will be doing that. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just work my way along, and then when we get to the drawers, I'm going to show you what I'm going to be doing with them. Yeah? Okay. So we had our initial texture, which was done with thick clay and Palmetto Dixie Bell paint. Then on top of that, I stippled on just the Palmetto by itself. And then I went back in with this thick mix and just did areas that didn't have any of the detail underneath. That's all I've done, and I've left all the middle sections. I've left the top at the moment. Now, the drawers, I will come at the end of this process and I will paint this with just the flat Palmetto, this inside edge. But what you should do is you should tape your drawers off if you're using a whole load of texture just around the edges, because you don't want it dry and your drawers not fit back in. So I've just taped down this edge. I'll paint it all in and do my inside lip once I've got my texture on and it's been on all night. So this is how thick it's getting. It's thickening up as we go. So all I'm going to do is make sure that I've got a nice line of texture round the insides. Now, as I said, we're going to be decoupaging, so I don't want it too thick and crusty here, so we can need to get rid of this on this drawer. You can wipe them down if you're worried about it, but I know that it's my own decoupage paper and I know it'll stick, and I know it'll stick without any wrinkles either, so we are good. So that's the good thing about our decoupage paper being so robust and slightly thicker. It's really good. You can put it over texture and it's not going to have any effect. So I'm just going to go on, do all my drawers, and then we'll get onto the, oh, there's a hair there, get onto my top, and then we'll let it dry. Come back to this tomorrow. So I've got this pretty thick mixture left, and I'm actually going to apply it to the top. This is an all over sort of textured piece. Now I'm applying it quite thick because I'm going to work in sections, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp some texture into it. So I'm probably only going to go this far just now. I want thick and thin, so I'm applying it kind of like some of it thick, some of it thin. Now, I'm just going to stop the camera while I just get my stamp. This is a Redesign by Prima stamp. It's called Stamp Damask. This is how it looks. It's one whole stamp. So I'm just going to pop it on, and I'm just going to try and push it into the wet paint. And let's see what this dries like tomorrow. So I'm just going to come along and do here as well. Just making sure. I should have done, I've probably got a roller over here, but well, I've got a tiny one. And lift, and gonna kind of put there. Now, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for that sort of worn, rustic look. Do here, and I'm just going to place it down here. So I'm going to go on and do the rest of the top in the same way I've showed you, and then we're going to let it dry, and we'll come back to it tomorrow. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through some of my process here. So as I said, this is new out. It's from the Hot Chicks collection, and this one here is called Jean. Now, what did I do to try and make my furniture work? I knew that this was going to go in the middle. I could have went for an olive green for my base, but I didn't. I chose this green here of the breast of the Bird of Paradise. Now, what I'm going to do now is, I don't want you to be alarmed, because we're going to then go and do a wash over the top of it to make it less yellow. But over the top of all my detail now, I'm going to be adding Tilton, which is this yellow here. And you'll see it going on the furniture in a minute. The reason why I put all the texture was to try and emulate some of this texture underneath. When I put this on, I'm going to be putting it on as a full sheet like this into my furniture, and round these edges here I'm going to be distressing so that it's not a square shape that goes into this shape here. So and there's probably going to be some stamping. I am going to brown wash my yellow once I've done my yellow. But how are we applying our yellow? I want to keep some green. I don't want to keep all of it green. I want some of it to be completely yellow. It's a sort of, this is where, you know, you start to decide and play around with what you want in your furniture. Now, I've got a blending brush here. I toyed with using a sponge, an actual sponge. I toyed with using a blade, but I think I'm going to apply it with a brush. So I don't want to go too much into my texture. So on the really textured part, I want to kind of lay it across the top of my furniture. I want to kind of try and keep some of this green edge in here. So we're going to kind of just like, this is just playing around with it really. You want some bits thicker than the others. I'm going to bring this across down here. Now, as I said, I'm going to put a wash over the top of this. Sort of kind of grunge it up a bit and make it work with the paper. So some of it I'm pushing light strokes, but some I'm applying thicker. I want to keep this, see this sort of green part here? I want to keep that. Maybe some round about these hinges at this side. So maybe something like that. This is just going to be a process where really you've applied your texture in the way you want it. How you're going to play with your paint now is really sort of your sort of process. I'm just showing you what you know can be done with texture. And once you start playing with texture, you can do so many things with your furniture. It brings your furniture to a whole new level. So I'm going to do something like that. Keep some of that. I want to keep some of this green down here. So all I'm going to do is just fiddle around with it, applying thick and thin where I think I want it, and just play with my paint. So I'm going to cover the whole of the front yellow. We'll just work on the front just now because it will be the same principle on both sides. So I'm going to get this to the point where we can start putting our colour wash on it, and then we'll move on. Okay, so back to our process again. I'm picking out predominantly beiges and golds from here now. Now, I've got the yellow on. You just saw me do this. And what I've mixed up in here is, now, normally I would use Annie Sloan's Hornflower. I didn't have any Hornflower, so what I did was I mixed Emperor Silk, a little bit of Athenian Black, a little bit of Barcelona Orange, and a little bit of the Tilton, and it gave me a chocolatey brown. Now, some I just kept in a small container, but this stuff here I watered down. Now, I've probably watered it down 3 times. the consistency of, I would say, hot chocolate. It looks quite yummy. So what I'm going to do with this is, just take my scoop out, is I have a sea sponge. It's already covered in brown because I tested it on my other door. I'm submerging it in my paint, and my cloth is here. And what I'm doing now is I'm putting a wash on it. I don't want to oversaturate my furniture at this point in time, especially in the stables, so I'm just going to work quickly. And what I'm trying to do is bring out, if you look at my paper again, this is becoming more like this, whereas this isn't. I could pick out the shell, but it would be darker. So this side, as you can see, looks more what I'm looking for. So this is what I'm doing now, and it's just a matter of putting it where you think you want it, letting it settle in some of the areas and joins around the door. I'm also applying it with a sponge just to put even more texture on it. So it's nice and wet. You work in small sections. You're not covering it all, so there's some of it here. And literally you're just wiping it back until you get what you're looking for. I'm quite liking how this is looking. Just getting down to this part here, making sure that I make it settle in all of these joints here. I catch those foot drips and ready to start wiping it back. So, and you're just going to play around with this until, another way you can do it is, but I can't do it in the stable because of the weather, is you can put it on and then you can spray water onto it. But I haven't got the climate to get that kind of paint effect dry. In the summer I can do things like this, but in the winter I try not to add too much water because this will take forever and a day to dry now. So that's what I'm going to do across the front. The yellow is going to go on the sides like we did on the front, and the brown wash is going to go on the sides until we're left with just the top unpainted. I did the same on the drawers. So here are my drawers. I just put my yellow on them and they'll get the same brown wash to bring it in line with my decoupage paper. So the next time you see this, we will be starting to put our decoupage paper on, and then we're going to start putting even more detail on the front. Okay, so using your watery paint, this has just been dried. I want to start putting some drips on. So I've got quite a bit of paint on here, and I'm just going to play with them first of all, see where they land. Now, what to do is get a wet cloth. It's the cloth that I did wipe the brown in with, and just see. So I cut it like this, but I don't want it to come all the way down, so I'm just going to take that away here. And I don't like where my paintbrush touched here, but I'm going to keep one short and one longer down the bottom here. Where did that come from? You have to work out where they just want to soften them a little bit. You don't want them to get rid of that one there. I don't want where my brush has touched it up the top there. Do you see what I'm trying to create? Just a really sort of worn sort of look with drips. I love a drippy piece of furniture, and I haven't done a drippy piece for a while, and I had a drip over the other side, and I thought I'm just going to keep that and I'm going to put some more in. So where are we going here? I think I might keep this area quite brown, so I won't wipe too much away there. I don't want those coming all the way down there. Soften that. That's fine because it's running into there, and maybe just one here coming down. But obviously where your brush is touched, you need to kind of, where did I just see that I didn't like there? So all I'm doing now is adding a little bit more brown as well. Maybe some here, and maybe if I could get that to drip onto the leg. So as you can see, its drips are fine. You just need to control them a little bit. You don't want, you know, like it looking too drippy. I think maybe this is a little bit soften this one, I think. Yeah, so I think I could do with one here. So that's all I'm doing now. What I'm doing next is I'm just gonna, the piece was dry before I put this brown on. I'm just gonna quickly heat gun to make sure there's no dampness in here, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply a decoupage paper. We've already kind of started to mix our colours in, and this is where it starts to get the fun part, because I can't move any further now with the process unless this is stuck on here, because I'm going to start pulling more colours out of here. And you'll find if you're doing something like this, when it gets so far in, that you actually need to apply it. So I'm just going to get set up, and we'll stick one sheet on, and then I'll just do the rest, and then we'll get to the next stage. Okay, so you normally rip Made by Marley decoupage paper, but I'm just cutting this out roughly to see what the sort of shape is going to be. It's going to be something like this. I'm going to take these two parts off here and these two parts off the bottom, because I'm going to be putting texture around it, so it doesn't matter that I'm cutting it with scissors and it's got a straight edge. Normally, if you want to blend it in, rip it. But I don't need to rip it right now. So I'm just keeping the border on it as well, because it's not going to, actually it's going to be a little bit tight. I'm just going to cut the border off too. I've got awful shaky hands today. I think I'm giddy. I've spent so long in bed planning and planning and planning and planning. And now I'm a very happy bunny that I get to sit in my stable and create. Now, this is how this is going to go on here, like this. Now, same way that we always apply Made by Marley decoupage paper, a nice, even thin, but not too thin coat of Mod Podge. Oh, that's going everywhere. Tidier than I do it, actually. Now, smooth out all your wrinkles. If there's wrinkles in your Mod Podge, you're more likely to get air bubbles. Smooth it out like that. Bring your paper up and smooth it down. Now, then let it dry completely. Don't start messing around with it. I'm going to have to cut this little part here just so that that sits in nice there. A bit too much down this edge here. Hang on. Was rushing as per usual. Take that down in there. I'm not too worried about that, because I'm going to be putting, I'm just going to take this part off because it's going to annoy me. There we go. This down here could do with a little bit more glue. And you can see I'm not even touching the seams. I'm not going back over it. I'm not doing anything to it. I'm just leaving it alone to dry smooth, because you want it to dry smooth. I'm not too happy with that part there. And just make sure I've got enough glue up there. And I'll put an air bubble here in the middle. Just smooth that out, and then when you let it dry, and I'll show you this paper once it's dried, there won't be a single wrinkle on it. There we go. I'm just going to leave that and not fiddle around with it anymore. Do what I say I should do. Okay, I'm going to go on and I'm going to put the paper on the drawers and the other side and the two side panels. Okay, this is why I say you should never bin any parts of paint. The other day when I've done the green, this is what I had left over, and I put a lid on it. It's got all the clay in it, so it's really textured, and this is going to be perfect to give this a distressed look and blend in. So we're going to put this green on here, and some of it's a bit, because there's so much texture that I didn't scrape off underneath here, I'm just keeping. So I'm going to take it right up to, not all the edges, because I want to have some of that yellow, but coming in a bit around the top. And I'm going to do this the same with my other cupboards and my drawer fronts as well. So just, you know, like kind of have a play around with it. Put plenty of texture on the edges. You might need to do 2 coats of them if you think that, you know, it's not gonna, it's showing a little bit like you've got some texture there. Up around there. I want this to come there. And this will just kind of like tie in back into our bird's breast. Now this wasn't quite dry, so it's lifting a little bit, but you get the gist. Once it dries, I'll dry it off. Bring this in here a bit, and it's just to kind of like You can't just have it lying in there flat, and I wanted it to look a little bit like, you know, it was distressed. So this is what I'm doing here. I might bring that in a little bit there and a bit in here. Need some thicker paint. So I'm going to go along and I'm going to do this to all of that, and I think there might be another colour that goes over this. I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to stand back and have a look. It might just work as it is. I did want to bring more green back into it, so this might be the answer. Now in a minute, when I've dried this and everything, I've decided on these handles, because what I'm going to do is I'm not going to put the handle here. I'm going to put the handle in the middle here, about here, and I'm going to have some, make these more rusty. So I'm going to get Martin to apply them, and I'm going to have the sort of paint dripping down, something like that here. So these are completely different to what was on it. Big chunky wrought iron handle. Finish it off quite nicely, so and give it a whole new look, if you remember what it looked like in the beginning. But we've still got quite a lot to do, so I'm just going to go around with my green and then we'll get to the next parts. So we've got our decoupage paper on, we've put our green with the texture. Now all the steps that I'm about to show you, I'm going to break them down, is exactly what's happened on the other side of the piece of furniture, on the drawers and on the other cupboard front. So you just need to recreate what I'm about to show you now across your whole piece. Okay, so we have this on here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I've got some stays on in pumpkin. This isn't really doing a huge amount, this stamp. It's just, I'm just trying to build up some, like, get rid of some of the negative spaces. So I'm just going to be putting that on there like this. And down here, I'm just trying to eradicate the line of our decoupage paper. Now this isn't 100% dry right now, so it's still a little bit wet and it's still a little bit bubbly, but it'll come good when it's dry. So I'm just using the same stamp. I'm not even inking it up for the second part. This is all I did on the other side. You can see it's still a bit wet on here, but I'm going to stamp it over it anyway, so that when it dries, it dries. Now, so I've done that. The next thing, remember the stencils we used to put the raised stencils on? We'll wash these, but obviously I've used them on the other side. So we've got some of these, and we're going to put some of this on here. Now, I'm not looking for a pattern, to be honest with you. I'm just looking for a little bit of, just a little bit of texture on here. So, and this stencil is brilliant for raised stencils, but it doesn't do, I never think it does a great job when you're actually stenciling. So I'm just looking for like kind of dots and patterns. See, like this, that's all I'm looking for here. I'm not looking for it to be, it's just to fill in and get rid of and blur the lines, so that when this all dries, there's no kind of like, and I'm so glad I cut this stencil up now, because you know what, so far I've already used it more than I've ever used it before when it was big, because it was always too big for pieces of furniture. I wanted a really big one for a big piece of furniture, and then after that, when I'd finished the wardrobe, I thought, oh well, probably won't use that again. So I'm glad I've cut it up, and I'm already getting lots of use out of it, so I'm quite happy. So I'm just going round it, and I'm just picking out parts. I've just got a little sponge with a little bit of orange on it, and it's Barcelona orange. I just need to put a little bit more paint on my, I'm going to do down in here, and just twist it and put some texture there. And let's see if we can kind of manipulate apart this part here, maybe see if I can get this shape. So once you've done that, that's that kind of filled out. The next thing I did was, I just put the lid on my Stays On ink, was I took some of this Emperor Silk red paint, and I just dipped my finger in the side. I don't want an awful lot. And here and there, I just rubbed it. I just rubbed it onto some of the texture. Not everywhere, just kind of some places. I've got some nice texture up here, so I'll put some on here. I'm not trying to recreate the flowers again. I'm just giving this piece, because there's the red here, I'm just building in the red. So it looks more like sort of kind of just the bits of distress, but it's just kind of like raised. Now then what I did was I just ran my finger and I just put some, this is a whole new level for me. I just built in some red there. Now I'm just going to quickly dry this because I want to put some orange over the top of this on the stencil, so I'll just quickly dry it. Okay, so all I did then was on the other side is I just did exactly the same. It's just making those sort of orange spots that make it look a little bit distressed. I didn't do it everywhere. I just randomly picked some parts that I thought would look quite good. And as I said, I'm not kind of like being very precious about it. Now, once I did this, I'm just doing all my patches of orange. What I did was I got the Palmetto, which was the original green, and I did exactly the same thing. I just took the stencil again and I tried to make this one look more, now because it's so raised it's a little bit tricky, actually like a stencil. And I just ran it around, in and around this sort of orange, where I kind of like, not on top of the orange, just kind of like different sections. And I just did things like this, you know, just here and there, just giving a little bit of interest, and maybe some here. Sorry, my hand's in the way. And I'm not trying to do a perfect stencil, far from it. I'm just trying to get a little bit of interest into the doors. Oop. And I'll go on and I'll do down the bottom, I'll dry it, and then we're going to get to the stage where you all will be quite horrified. Okay, so I'll just do some of this down here. So the next thing I did was I was going to put sort of brown distress around the edges of the doors to frame it. You know how I like to frame things out. But what I decided to do was just heavily distress it. I started with sandpaper, but I realised with all the thick texture, it was harder and harder to come off. So what I'm doing is, and I'll show you, I just started, and you're probably going to be horrified at this, but it actually, the other side looks amazing. And I just started to distress it, and I just tipped off the paint down the side. So I kind of went like this down the edges, but then what goes that way, you have to do this way as well, so that it looks like proper chips. And I would take your time on this, you want it to look. But I just framed out my door by just scraping off the paint. And because it's got the texture on it, it comes off like, so you don't want that to look like that. So you have to go this way now. I took the sides off. I did up here. I distressed up here quite heavily. I took the paint away from the corners, and I'm trying to make it look quite natural. It's fabulous to come off because it's got all that really good texture. Now I want down the edge of this cupboard, because obviously I'm framing it out. And because it's got the texture on it, it's chipping really nice. Don't want like it when it looks like that. And so this is all I did, and I weathered down in here, and I did that, and I did a sort of detail round here, and I just built up lots of paint. I just scraped it away and chippied all that paint off. Right, I want to make sure that there's none down in that corner. And I took this bottom edge away. So this is something you really need to take your time over. I'm rushing to show you, but I'll go back to this and I'll tidy it all up. The drawers have been distressed. The front has been distressed. I need to take some paint off the front where it would get bashed. So something maybe a bit like this. And just scrape it off like that. I'll do the same on the sides and distress those. We'll put it in, I'll get Matt to put the handles on it, and then we'll do the handle detail, and then we'll get to the top. I'm super pleased with this. This is what 10 days in your bed, you lie in bed and think, what can I do? What can I do? So this is how it looks as it is. I'm just going to work on edging up underneath these handles. Now I have my original blue, but I've got, brown. And I've got a brown I mixed up, which was the thicker one of this before I watered this one down. Now, how am I going to do this? I better have a cloth at the ready because I don't want to balls it up. But I want to have it so that it's looking like it's, I don't mind putting a little bit around that. Do I like that? Yeah, I think I do. Don't want to. I'm going to put some dark wax around it as well, so that's probably enough of that. Now, I'm just going to do the same, but what I want to try and do with these ones is I want it to try and drip down here onto here if I can. So I'm going over a ledge, so let's see if I can make it go down here as well. So that it's... Now, this is where you're going to need your thicker stuff to do up and around your decoupage paper. It's not the right colour of brown yet, but once the dark wax is applied, I think that, you know, I'll get it more what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go on and do some of these drips down these drawers and do the last handle. We'll let that dry off and then we'll deal with the top, I think, next before we do any waxing or anything. We'll let this dry off a bit because this table's quite damp. Okay. What I've decided to do with the top is, because I really like the texture, I'd kind of dry brushed some of the yellow around the edges at the top here. But I really just like this, but I want to just darken it down a little bit. So I've just got my sponge again, bring it out a little bit, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to work in sections, and I'm hoping that this will settle down into the areas that I put the texture on. Now my cloth is dry. I want to keep more of the brown near the edges and some of this other stuff. Like so, I just want to kind of do this and keep more of the brown around the edges. I've got a brush and a sponge because I wasn't sure which one I was going to use most. The sponge is molten. I need to make sure that I get plenty on that yellow rim edge. And again, I'm kind of taking more from the centre because I'm going to distress this a little bit around the edges as well. So just patting it, giving it a little bit of like a kind of grungy texture. That's all I'm doing. And might leave that kind of darker edge there. So I'm going to go on and I'm going to do the rest of this. Yep. I'm just finishing off clear waxing. I've clear waxed from the feet to here, and I've given it 2 coats of top coat sealer on the top. So this has all been clear waxed. So what we got now is I made up, if you add clear wax and mica powder, you get your own coloured waxes and you can make any colour you want. But I'm just kind of going in here and I'm just kind of like putting a little bit of green on these handles. That's all I'm doing with the wax. I'm touching up some areas, but it's not hugely noticeable. There's a little bit of But when I come in with the dark wax, because I've already I've sealed it with the clear, I can start to age in all my corners. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go round, aging in all of these edges here to make it look like it's old. I might do some along this band up the top, just to kind of like grunge that up. But it'll be predominantly around the insides of the drawers and around the insides of the cupboards. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm just using my finger because I feel I've got more control how I would like it, you know, where I want the darkness to be. So, and it's another good way of getting rid of your line of where your decoupage paper is. So make sure you use that to your advantage. So I'm going to go on and I'm just going to dark wax my inside my edges like this, just to age it off. I'm going to be using some of my homemade wax, some of my moss green wax to kind of highlight it. So where you've got your dark, you could always put like some highlights if you wanted to put some highlights in there like that, just to kind of highlight that out. You can do that if you want. Making your own waxes is a really economical thing to do if you don't have a colour of wax. But I need to dark wax it first. So I'm going to do that, put the detail. Everything's been sealed. I need to still wax the sides, and then it'll be down to staging. It's finished. What did we do? Well, if you look at the video right back at the beginning, we cut the feet off. We shortened it to make it more modern. The sort of higher ones from the 40s are used something, they went grand, and so we wanted to bring it down a bit. We added bentonite clay to our paint, and we put texture on first. Then we painted it with more textured paint. We decoupaged it. We what didn't we do? We stenciled it. We added waxes. Wax I made with any clear wax and mica powder. You can make your own coloured waxes. They work just the same as ordinary wax. They cure just the same as ordinary waxes. And this paper is called Jean, and it's from the Hot Chicks collection, which is coming out. It should be out by the time you see this video. There's 3 different papers with 3 different vintage birds. There's a sort of pinky one, a reddy one, and this sort of goldy coloured one. And they've all got funky names. What we did with the top of this piece, which is quite interesting, is we stamped into the texture of the top of it, and then I just brown washed it. I mixed up my own brown wash, didn't have any Hornflower paint so that was just some Emperor's Silk and a little bit of Athenian black and a little bit of Barcelona orange made my brown wash well watered down. You saw it was watery. The top was sealed. That's everything about today's piece. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've really liked this one. It's really nice. I don't even think the camera does it justice, just to how funky it truly is. We did a lot of distressing as well. So I've been Lyle from Made by Marley. If you like this video, give us a big thumbs up, and I love reading your comments. So, and I'm sorry I'm a bit behind on the comments because I've been sick. Martin's doing the poorly face, so but I will get back to everybody that's maybe asked me a question. If you're new to our channel, could you consider subscribing? I reimagine furniture every week, just about. Sometimes you maybe get 2 pieces if it's a bonus. And if you push the bell notification, then you'll be notified each time we release a new video. Thanks very much for watching. I've been Lyle from Made by Marley. I'll see you again another day. Bye bye.